Hey everyone, Andrew here, and it's time for another manga series review. So, I was originally going to do a completely different manga anime combo because I wanted to talk about that one because every version of it that exists is dramatically different from the other versions. But when I was doing research on it and looking at the manga itself to get some more details on it, I found out that there are actually three versions of the manga, and I'm not 100% certain which of the three versions is the one I read. So that one is going to go on the back burner until I either can figure out which one it was, or until I can read all three and give you a full opinion on all of it. We'll see which happens first. But for now, I'm going to do what my original choice was before that one came to mind. And this one came to mind because of Facebook. I joined a Facebook club that, is fans of this show, and they're constantly posting pictures that are like, here are the swordsmen from Shonen Anime, which one's the best? And everyone's always voting for this one because it's fans of the show, so obviously. But having gone through so many of those and looked at so many of them, I came to the realization that this show is actually one of the best shonen shows out there. And sadly, it's one of the ones that also kind of gets pushed aside. I had to defend this show for myself because it's one of those things like this came out during the second wave of shonen after Dragon Ball Z kind of created the genre, or at least made the genre super popular. I wouldn't say it actually created it. You have a lot of people now who are joining this and getting into shonen and talking about it, and they are only really focusing on the shonen from this decade. So that's everyone's talking about My Hero Academia, everyone's talking about Attack on Titan, and sometimes they'll talk about Bleach or Naruto if that's where they started, or they'll bring up Dragon Ball Z because it's the origin of this genre to an extent. But this one kind of gets pushed off to the side, and I don't understand why, and I feel the need to defend this and argue this because this is, to me, one of the best shonen animes of all time. So I will be talking about it today. Today I will be talking about Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho was a shonen series created by Yoshihiro Togashi back in the early 90s. Like, literally, the manga came out in December of 1990 and ran till summer of 94. The anime ran about the same time from 92 to 94. And they're pretty short for shonen animes and mangas. The manga itself is only 19 books, which sounds like a bit, but when you really look at manga, 19, especially like for shonen manga, 19 is a small number. Like, Dragon Ball Z is 25, Bleach and Naruto, Bleach is in the high 30s or low 40s, Naruto's in the 50s, and then you got One Piece, which it has never ending and just goes on forever. So a series to be this compact is actually really impressive, and to have it be as good, if not better, than these longer running series. I'm going to go a bit over. Basically, I'm going to talk about the plot. I'm going to go over each of the arcs at least a little bit. I'm going to try not to spoil too much of any of the arcs, but there are certain arcs where I'm going to have to talk about how they end to make sense of the later arcs. So, spoilers for a show that's 29 years old. The plot of Yu Yu Hakusho. So we start out by following Yusuke Urameshi. And Yusuke Urameshi is 14 years old. He is 100% a delinquent. He skips class, doesn't pay attention, gets in fights all the time, flips up girls' skirts and things of that nature. He is a punk. And he constantly is getting in a fight with other kids, but specifically, he gets in a lot of fights with his rival from another school whose name is Kazuma Kuwabara. And Kuwabara has his own little gang, and they constantly, like, every day go and try to pick a fight with Yusuke. And Yusuke always wins. Easily. Like, it's not even a contest. So Yusuke's, when not in fighting, he's hanging out on the roof, and he gets visited by his only friend in the world, who is Keiko Yukimura. And Keiko basically is a bit of a goody two-shoes, but she's his childhood friend. She's trying to get him on the right path to do the right things, go to class, stop getting in fights, things of this nature. And Yusuke doesn't seem to care a whit about any of that. And you can tell that she cares about him, but that you don't necessarily feel it the other way. Other than he lifts up her skirt to look at her panties. But that's I think that was more to annoy her than anything else. Yeah, so basically Yusuke's walking around the streets, and he sees this kid playing with a ball, and he grabs the ball and he's like, hey kid, you need to stop playing on the streets here. You could kick this into the street and get hit by a car. So stop playing over in this area. And the kid's like, whatever, and takes the ball and plays, and kicks the ball into the street, and the kid goes chasing after the street, only to have a car come careening towards him. And at the last second, Yusuke dives forward, pushes the kid out of the way, and gets hit by the car. So Yusuke finds himself staring down at the accident going, wait, what in the world is going on? And he has a voice behind him going, well, you're dead, silly. And turns around and he sees this woman named Botan. And she reveals that she is a Grim Reaper, or a pilot on the River Styx, who is there to ferry his soul either into the underworld or the spirit world, aka heaven or hell. And Yusuke doesn't believe her remotely at all. And she has to try and convince him, so she takes him to his funeral. And there's a bunch of people there, but no one's really paying attention to it. The only people that are affected are his mom. He's a child of a single parent. She had him at 14. And this really doesn't play too much into the show, because I never knew she was his mom until way after I watched the show the first time. I thought she was his eldest sister. Like, they don't look that different in age. To be fair, they're only 18 years apart. No, so she's getting drunk and sobbing in the corner. Keiko is full-on sobbing and being consoled by her friends about what's going on. And then Kuwabara shows up with his gang, and he starts, like, fighting to get to the front, trying to get to the coffin to open up and, you know, prove that Yusuke is still alive, and that he needs to come out here and fight him again. And while he's, you know, sobbing in a manly way, I guess. But yeah, and Yusuke's like, I guess I am actually dead. Okay, so let's go through the judgment. And so Botan takes him to her boss named Koenma. And Koenma is the son of the underworld's ruler, King Enma. But yeah, Koenma has a really interesting design in that he looks like a toddler. And he even has a little binky. And Yusuke is just laughing it up the entire time he's seeing this character. Like, are you serious? This is the person who's going to decide my fate? Seriously? And Koenma's just like, you know, you're an oddball too. Like, you shouldn't even be here. Like, everything about you screams you would never, ever sacrifice yourself for someone else, let alone a kid. Like, we don't even have a place for you, because you weren't supposed to be dead yet. So Yusuke's like, well, then can you send me back to my party? And Koenma's like, well, we might be able to do that, but it's going to take some work. You might have to prove to us that you are even worthy of going back. And so basically, Botan takes Yusuke back to the human world, and he has to complete a bunch of trials to get his human body back. A lot of it is just like him storing his energy into this egg and using it to build up power. And tries to help out the people around him and do some stuff. And they find out that Kuwabara has a sixth sense, so he can actually kind of sense spirits and can kind of hear Yusuke at times. But this is more used to bug Kuwabara than anything else. Yusuke also learns that he can visit people in their dreams, and that if someone is unconscious, he can actually take over their body. And he's basically he uses this power to try to convince his mom to not burn his body, so that he has a body to return to. And he has a hard time with that. He ends up visiting Keiko in her dreams, and manages to convince her that he's coming back, and they manage to keep his body around. However, the house that Yusuke is in ends up catching fire with his body and Keiko in there. And Keiko isn't strong enough to pull his body out of the fire and will not leave him. So Yusuke throws the egg into the fire, saving her life and stopping the fire. And Yusuke turns to Botan and he's like, alright, well, I guess we're going back to the spirit realm. And Koenma shows up as a giant projection in the sky and it's like, actually no, you passed. Good job. You chose to save someone else over yourself. Again, so that means this is not just a one-time thing. So, like, we can put you back in your body, however, it has to be that someone kisses you before the sun sets on this day. And your body has to be glowing green, it will be glowing yellow with energy for that to happen. And he goes and visits Keiko in her dreams and tells her, you need to come kiss me to wake me up, bring me back to the world. Keiko goes to his house first thing in the morning, and his body isn't glowing yet. It's only, like, at his toes, and she doesn't, like, lift it up to check or anything. So she leaves, and he's like, oh, dang it. So he tries to talk to his mom and get her to it, but she's getting drunk off her butt, so she's of no help. So he ends up going to Kuwabara to try to convince Kuwabara to kiss him, and this just drives Kuwabara insane. He's like, no, I'm not doing that, no! And having an extreme reaction, just like, and just runs away, type of thing. So, thankfully, while Yusuke's accepting the fact that no one's going to kiss him and bring him back, Keiko has gone back to his apartment at that night and sees his body glowing and kisses him. And he wakes up in the human world. So Yusuke starts going back to school, he starts going back to his life and getting back to being alive again. And he ends up coming across this person, and he's like, wait, something is off with this person. So he ends up following this person, and he's like, there's something really off about you. I don't think you're from this world. He ends up chasing the guy and beats the crap out of him, and then a little demon pops out of the guy's mouth and starts to run away, but Botan shows up and captures it. And goes to Yusuke and is like, well, you're already at work already. I see we've made a good choice in this. And Yusuke's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh, Koenma decided that you are to be our new spirit detective, or underworld detective, or spirit world detective. There's a couple different translations. But basically, since you went to the spirit realm and came back, you now have supernatural powers. And you are to be our detective to keep the demons from destroying the earth. And you've gained a couple different things, but basically you've gained the ability to sense demon energy, and you can also use your own spiritual energy and use it as a weapon, and you can fire it off through energy. So basically he figures out that he can fire off energy through his finger and calls it the spirit gun, or the ray gun, depending on the translation. But unfortunately, at his current level, he can only use the spirit gun once a day. So Yusuke's like completely like, I don't want to do this. Like, no, I want nothing to do with the spirit world. I'm not going to be your spirit detective. And Botan's like, all right, well, I can just take you back to the spirit world, and we can leave you there. And Yusuke's like, okay, fine. I just hope this doesn't become a big thing that I have to do all the time. And then almost immediately, 3 demons break into the spirit realm and steal 3 sacred items and flee into the human world. Yusuke has to go out and hunt them, and he ends up coming across them, and demons are named Hiei, Kurama, and Goki. And Hiei and Kurama take off, and you leave Goki to destroy Yusuke. And Goki's item gives him basically impenetrable skin. Makes him nearly impossible to kill, and because Yusuke had already used his one spirit gun earlier, he gets his butt handed to him in this fight. But the next day he goes and finds them again and starts fighting Goki again, and manages to defeat Goki by shoving a stick into his mouth, holding his mouth open, and firing the spirit gun down his body. As he's leaving that fight, beaten and bloody, and like barely able to walk, he comes across Kurama. And Kurama's like, hey, I don't want to fight you. Let's just go talk over here. And Yusuke's like, I don't think I could fight you right now because I'm pretty beaten up, but yeah, let's go talk. And Kurama's like, I have no desire to hurt the humans anyway. In fact, I am actually a human. I just have a demon also living within me. So basically, like, a demon was reborn as a human inside of Kurama. And he's like, this item I don't plan to use for any negative reasons. I will give it to you gladly. I just need it for 24 hours. If you give me 24 hours, I promise that I will give this to you with no fight. And I will turn myself over to the spirit realm to do with me what they will. Yusuke's a little suspicious of this, but he allows it, and he follows it and finds out that Kurama's human mother is dying in a hospital, and that Kurama wants to use this item to sacrifice himself to bring his mother back. But it turns out that the item wants to do way more than just take Kurama's life, so Yusuke and Kurama end up having to team up to destroy the item to keep it from doing a lot of damage. And thankfully, for whatever reason, Kurama's mother wakes up and actually gets better. So, yay for that. And that only leaves Hiei left. And Yusuke goes to fight Hiei, and Hiei is this very powerful demon. So he has a third eye in his forehead that gives him the power to control small demons and humans with just a glance. Ends up powering himself up to the second form, where he develops eyeballs through the rest of his body, which gives him, the impenetrable defense, and nearly destroys Yusuke, but Yusuke manages to win through a ricochet shot that arguably he should have seen coming, but, the item is destroyed, Hiei gives up and returns to the spirit realm to seek punishment. So yeah, Yusuke returns home. A couple days later, he's visited by Botan again, who's like, oh hey, you need to go to this special tournament that's being organized by a kung fu master named Genkai. She is a super powerful spiritual martial arts master. She has a technique that's said to destroy, demons down to the molecule type thing. And we need you to go there because if you can win the tournament, you will gain she might teach you and train you how to be a better spirit detective and make you more powerful. But also B, there is a demon down there named Rando, who has been known for stealing martial arts techniques and killing the masters who he steals them from. So you need to figure out who Rando is and kill him, and then if you can, win the tournament and become Genkai's apprentice. Yusuke ends up going there, and he ends up running into Kuwabara, who's also there to compete. And during the tournament, we find out that Kuwabara actually has his ability too. Because of his sixth sense ability, he can tap into his spirit, and he's able to summon his own spirit weapon using a piece of wood called the Spirit Sword. And they do pretty good, but and end up getting to the final four. But they end up figuring out who Rando is, and he ends up fighting Kuwabara. He shrinks Kuwabara to this size and tries to squish him, but thankfully Kuwabara survives it, but barely. Then Yusuke and him fight, and I'm not gonna spoil who wins. I'm not gonna spoil that fight because it's a really interesting, well done fight. But we know who won because Yusuke survives. So yeah, Yusuke gets chosen as Genkai's apprentice. He spends months training with her, and only really manages to up his ability to use the spirit gun to a couple more shots. He also gains a special ability known as the Spirit Shotgun, which is basically he fires 5 blasts at once out of his fist. And that's a good thing because the demon attack just starts as he gets back home, where a group of 4 demons known as the 4 Beasts have gotten their hands on a flute that summons these Makai insects that burrow into human beings and turn them into zombies and spread throughout. So in order to keep humanity from being overtaken by this, Yusuke and Kuwabara have to travel into the Labyrinth Castle to find the 4 Beasts. And along the way they are joined by Kurama and Hiei, who have agreed to help in order to lighten their sentences. And this actually is a really good thing because we get to see a bunch of different fights. Each of the 4 Beasts is battled by a different one of the team. You get to see that Kurama uses plants. You get to see that Hiei has developed this new technique where he summons dragons from his arm and uses a sword to fight. And it's kind of interesting because you never see his eyeball form again. He never uses that technique anywhere else in the show. And I've heard a couple different reasons. The most likely reason, and probably the real reason, is that the author did not like doing the art for that. And that it didn't actually look that great. Which is kind of true. But Kuwabara has gotten to the point where he can use the Spirit Sword without having to have a piece of wood as the amplifier. And I'm not going to spoil any more of that, but yeah, they finish off that mission. A little bit later, so Yusuke is sent on a rescue mission to rescue this demon woman named Yukina. And she is an ice apparition. Basically, she creates tears that can be used to heal or grant wishes. Kuwabara agrees to go on this mission because he sees a picture of Yukina and is immediately fallen in love with her and starts chasing after her. and is like, I need to rescue my love. So yeah, Yukina's being held by this group called the Black Club. And the leader of the Black Club hired this group of mercenaries known as the Toga Brothers. And the two Toga Brothers are these humans with demonic power, and they are extremely strong. The younger Toga brother can transform himself into almost anything, and he's virtually unkillable. As long as a single molecule of him is left alive, he can reform himself and be fine. The elder Toga brother is basically impenetrable and has this extremely strong super strength. And Yusuke and Kuwabara have to team up to fight these guys together, and they just barely manage to defeat them and rescue Yukina. However, both Yusuke and Kuwabara know that something was off with that fight. That they just barely managed to escape with their lives. It wasn't actually a victory. And the older Toga brother shows up and visits Yusuke, and he's like, "You are correct. I was only using maybe 20% of my power. But I have a feeling you have the potential to bring out 100% in me. So, how about you come and show me that you have this strength?" There's a little tournament we're holding for the Black Club called the Dark Tournament. You get a team together, and I'll see you at the finals if you survive. And so Yusuke goes and gathers up a team, and we lead into the Dark Tournament arc. And I'm not going to spoil this any more than that, because this arc is freaking amazing. It is one of the best anime arcs of all time. I highly recommend it. It's just really well told, really interesting. The only negative about it is a tournament after having just not that long ago had a tournament. This is a pattern we are going to see in this anime, unfortunately. But this tournament is honestly one of the best things in all of anime. The only things that I will say about it is you find out that the elder Toga brother used to be a human. He and Genkai used to be a couple and worked together. But when she saw him going down this darker path, she refused and went towards a lighter path. And that Yusuke finally manages to learn Genkai's special attack. Not that he uses it all that often for the rest of the show, but he does figure it out and can use it. So then we move on to the next arc, which is known as the Chapter Black. And Chapter Black starts with Yusuke returning home from the tournament when he is immediately captured and kidnapped by these three teenagers with superhuman abilities. Kuwabara has to get Hiei and Kurama together to go rescue him, and they actually end up finding out that these was all a test set up by Genkai to prepare them for the thing that's about to happen. Basically, that there is a new player out there who's just returned back on the scene named Shinobu Sensui. And Shinobu Sensui is the former spirit detective. He's the Yusuke's predecessor. And he had such a high level of natural spiritual ability that he could have taken down the Toga brothers himself without even breaking much of a sweat. But basically, he was so successful until he stumbled a thing called the Black Book, or the Black Bible, or the Black Chapter, whatever you want to call it. Basically, it is a videotape of the worst atrocities ever committed by man. And he saw the video, and his entire personality shifted. He now sees humanity as a vile, terrible thing, worse than demons. And he's returned to the Earth realm to open a portal to the demon plane and let the demons in to destroy all of humanity. And it turns out, the entire reason, Yusuke was picked is because he's the complete and utter opposite of Sensui. Sensui was an extremely good person who wanted to do the right things, was extremely powerful in the spiritual area, and Yusuke is none of those things. And he puts up a very, very good fight in this. This is one of the ones where, unfortunately, I'm going to have to ruin a bit of the arc. I apologize. But it's basically, he figures out the way, how to open up the portal and who has the ability to do that. And that is Kuwabara, who has reached a level with his power that he can now slice through dimensions with his spirit sword. And he uses that to open up a portal in a cave, and Yusuke tries to stop Sensui, but ends up getting beaten to death by Sensui and left to die. He's like, basically, Sensui manages to step through the portal, ends up in the demon realm. During all of this, like, Hiei, Kuwabara, and Kurama are just trying to fight off all the demons to keep them from escaping this cave and escaping into the rest of the human realm. Yusuke, as he's dying, hears this voice, and it says, "You have so much power in you that you don't even realize," and it unleashes this power in him. And we find out that Yusuke is the great, add a few more greats in there, grandchild of one of the 3 demon kings. Specifically a demon king named Raizen. That Raizen had made it to the human realm and had fallen in love with a human and had given birth to a child. And that Yusuke is the descendant of that child. So Yusuke reaches this unhuman, ridiculously high level of demon power and goes into the demon realm and beats Sensui to utter defeat and is given the chance, like, he's at the point where it's like you can kill him or you cannot, and Yusuke doesn't want to do it, but Raizen takes over his body and forces Yusuke to kill Sensui. Yusuke returns to the human realm, and they manage to close the portal, and thankfully no demons were able to escape from the cave due to Hiei and Kuwabara and everyone keeping them at bay. Yusuke is then stripped of his detective title because he is not in control of himself, and there's a very real worry that he could go on a rampage and kill everybody. Yusuke doesn't like this either. He doesn't like the idea of being under anyone's control, and he wants to learn how to access this power and control this power and keep anyone from taking him over. And so he agrees to follow some of Raizen's followers into the demon plane. He goes to Kikyo and tells her what he's going to do, and she's like, "No, you need to stay here. You can't just go and leave me." And he makes her a promise that he will return within 5 years. And he travels into the demon realm. Yusuke has gone down to meet his ancestor Raizen, who is basically on the verge of death. He's just about to die. He decides that he's going to make Yusuke his successor and start training him to use his power. During this time, Hiei and Kurama have also both gone into the underworld, and they have both met up with the 2 other kings of the underworld. So Hiei ends up meeting this woman named Mukuro, and Mukuro is one of the 3 kings of the demon plane. She and Hiei end up developing a really strong relationship, and he ends up becoming her second, and they end up actually kind of falling in love for a little bit. And you find out a lot about her. She's really interesting. Like, she was born a slave, and she spent, like, her entire body is, like, covered in scars and things due to abuse. She's even got, like, robotic parts that had to replace, like, her eye and stuff. She is actually the most interesting thing about this arc. And then you have Kurama, who ends up meeting Yomi, who is the other 3rd king of the demon plane. And it turns out that Yomi used to be Kurama's second in command when he was a full demon. Yomi and Kurama agree to fight together and train together, and he ends up becoming Yomi's second in command. Raizen dies, and Yusuke takes over command of his territory. And he knows that there is most likely going to be a war to figure out who is the new true king of the underworld. Decides that he's going to take the first step, and he decides to set up a tournament. I know, another tournament, and it's like, that is going to be, like, one of the big flaws with this series in general, is the fact that they do go back to the tournament a lot. But basically, yeah, he wants a tournament that anyone can enter, and whoever wins the tournament gets to rule the realm for a set number of years. And I'm not going to spoil any more of it than that, but it's really interesting. It's got a lot of good fighting in it. It's unfortunately a bit derivative because it's not as good as the Dark Tournament. It just isn't. It tries. It really wants to be, but it's like, yeah, there's a couple good ideas, but it just kind of falls apart. However, I will say, the final episode is amazing. It's one of the best finales of any anime I've seen. And that's basically, it ends with 5 years have passed, Keiko has basically had to get on with her life, and she still thinks about Yusuke, but she's had to deal with him not being around, and he shows up, and there's this beautiful sunset, and they like wrap their arms around each other and are crying, and it's gorgeous. It's the perfect, happy, uplifting ending for the series. And it's really good that they did that and didn't stick to the manga ending of he just came back to Earth without telling her and started a ramen cart. Like, they really fixed the ending. Like, the ending of the anime is so much better. And it's really gorgeous and just full circle, happy, uplifting, beautiful. And I do love this series, and I do recommend this series. The question becomes, like, why is this one of the shows that's kind of gotten forgotten? And probably the main answer is because it came out in the early 90s. One of the sad facts that I've seen from certain anime fans is that a lot of the people now that are the younger age that are getting into it, they only care about the now. They don't care about anything that came before it. It's too old. It's too slow. And I get that to a certain extent. And it's like, they will watch Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z because of the history, because it's one of the ones that set up all of the templates. But they'll usually like skip this and go on to Naruto or Bleach, or if they're going to do any of the other older ones. And I think it's a shame, because this is easily one of the best written shows. So the things that makes this show great is, the fighting itself. It's kind of like that perfect in-between of the classical power charging of Dragon Ball and the more modern actual fighting of nowadays. It's kind of a good balance of the two. But I think one of the best things about the show, the thing that makes it stand out the most, is the lead. Yusuke Urameshi is unlike any other shonen protagonist, because he is not a hero. At least not in the beginning. He doesn't think like a hero. He isn't an overall good person. He starts off as a kid that fights people, kid that looks to fight people. Him actually choosing to save other people over himself is a surprise, even to maybe him. Like, that's the entire reason he got chosen to be, it's the spirit detective. The entire reason he was chosen to have this chance. Someone posted on that group, like, how different the show would be if Kuwabara had been the one that rescued the child and not Yusuke. And I and a bunch of other people had the same response, which is, if Kuwabara had done the heroic thing and saved the kid, the show would not happen. Because Kuwabara is the hero. Kuwabara is the good person doing the right thing and trying to be the best person. He is the stereotypical shonen hero. And him choosing to save the child would be expected, in which case he would just be sent to the spirit realm and that would be it. And there would be no show. But because it's Yusuke, and it's someone you don't expect to do this, and it's someone who spends most of the series being like, I don't want anything to do with any of this. He only ever truly agrees if he's getting threatened to be killed again, or just because he wants to fight someone stronger. And it's not like Goku and Dragon Ball Super, where you're like, that's the only thing that's kind of defined that character at that point. But it's like, he's like, I want to challenge myself, I want to test myself, I want to find people who are stronger, but he also knows when he's in over his head. And also knows that it's like, just because you're my enemy doesn't mean I'm going to hold back. And he's just like he's just so different from every other protagonist that we've ever had in Shonen. Name another one that's close to this kind of character, because they usually tend to be the overall good guy. Like, you got a little bit of in Naruto when he was like a kid, but that was clearly him rebelling. Yusuke isn't rebelling. Yusuke is a punk that wants to beat up people and skip school and not give a damn about anything. And I know there's other animes that do characters like this, but not to this scale and to this level. And not have him actually still be a hero type of thing. I also like the cast is great. All of the characters are really interesting or have something going for them. You got Kuwabara, who is the perfect rival and antithesis to Yusuke Urameshi. He's louder. He's, the goody two-shoes to an extent. He wants to fight, but he wants to fight to take out evil versus just wanting to be stronger. You got Kurama and Hiei, who are the perfect, like, backup side characters. You got Kurama, who's extremely quiet, and you just looking at him, you're like, there's more going on to you than we think. And there's so many layers underneath him that you don't really ever even get to see much of. You just get to see a little bit of the surface. And his powers are a bit more magical. Like, anytime he's in a fight, he can just do something and he wins. Like, it's not like a skill that we see him build, for the most part. He just has all of this power. And then Hiei is just this good, Vegeta-esque character who's just there to fight and just there to, murder things, and he just wants to get stronger and take out the enemy. And the fact that him and Yukina are actually twins, brother and sister, is kind of interesting, especially because it never comes out. Like, he never reveals to Yukina who he is. I think she figures it out after a certain point, but it is kind of interesting that it's never like the siblings getting together and hug and becoming a family thing. He's like, no, I'm just protecting my sister, and I'm not going to let her know who I am. And that adds some to it. He's a really good balance. Like, I think this is a very well-balanced team. Like, even the side characters are all kind of interesting. You got Botan, you got Koenma. It's a really strong cast. Like, you have some great character design, some great interesting villains. Like, honestly, most of the villains have something about them that's somewhat interesting. Weakest characters are just, are obviously the ones they give, like, no explanation or depth to. But it's also, like, extremely well written. The beginning, the Spirit World arc, is amazing and really good, really funny, and has a completely different tone than the rest of the series. But it doesn't feel like an unnatural shift into the Spirit Detective stuff. It feels like a natural progressive. I've come across a few animes where it's like they keep changing what the tone of the show is, and that makes it really hard to stick with that show when it's like, I'm a goofball comedy. No, now I'm a drama. No, now I'm a mystery. Now I'm an action series. It's like, pick one, or at least stick to one long enough that I can get used to it. Like, this one started out as a comedy, straight up comedy, with very little fight action scenes and fighting, and morphed into one of the best shonen action series that I out there. And I would argue that the Dark Tournament arc is one of the best arcs in all of anime. That it is just so interesting, with so many interesting characters and different techniques and different ways of battling. Like, sometimes it breaks down into a fist fight, sometimes it breaks down into a, logical fight, having to be smarter than your opponent. It just works so well. I could argue it against the Cell Saga, I would argue it against the Frieza Saga, I would argue it against anything from almost any show as being, if not the best, definitely in the top 3 best arcs in all of anime. It's just so interesting. We have one of the best trainers in all of it, one of the best mentors with Genkai, who's this sassy older person who just doesn't want to put up with Yusuke shit. It's just the best. And it's got a good level of humor. It balances the humor and the action. It can get scary and dark, but it can also be really ridiculous and funny. And you can tell that a lot of good stuff came from this, because the guy that made this series went on to do Hunter x Hunter. Arguably one of the better shows out now, and has some of the best characters and the best arcs. And I think a lot of that, and the reason that I think that Hunter x Hunter is the way it is in response to how Yu Yu Hakusho was, and trying to steer away from that and do something different, and do something that isn't necessarily a shonen-like show. And but that is just my opinion. What do you all think? Do you like this series? Do you think it's really well told? Do you think it's a really good series? Did you like the manga more? Do you think I'm overhyping this? Because I'm trying to take nostalgia out of this. Like, if I looked at Dragon Ball and I tried to take all of my nostalgia out of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, I think I could find a lot of things that just don't work, or just too long, or a little bit flawed, or this, that, and the other. I can't really do that with this. Like, I could take as much nostalgia out of it as I want, but I don't find too many flaws. Like, the negatives are, like, we never see Hiei's eye form again. The final arc isn't that great in either form. Either the manga or the anime. And some of the side characters don't have a lot going for them. And that's really it. There's not a lot that I can really complain about this show in any way. And before I sign off on this, I do want to recommend one thing if you all haven't seen it. I do highly recommend the Yu Yu Hakusho Abridged series by Lanny Pator. Now, this show takes a little bit to get going. So when you first start it, it's going to be a bit rough because it was one of the first abridged series. It was one of the first handful to roll out after Little Karibo made Yu-Gi-Oh! So the first few episodes are a bit rougher. It's really well written with good comedy. It's just not the best edited and put together. And again, this was his first thing doing that. That said, some of the humor in this is absolutely amazing. There's a joke in the abridged series that I love where they have the scene where Keiko is sitting over Yusuke's body and she's about to lean down and kiss him. And they just show this truck going outside of the house and it just goes, "This is the neighborhood watch party, reminding you that necrophilia is still illegal." And you just hear Keiko go, "Damn it! Neighborhood watch, I was getting in my way!" And I love it. It's just so ridiculous. I also do recommend, he did an abridgment of the film, which I'm not going to talk about that film in regards to the show because it's filler. The abridged one is really good, has some really great stuff. It has my favorite joke, I think, of all time, where Yusuke gets punched through a car, and you just hear from inside the car, "I swear to ass, I'm gonna kick your god." I'm like, it's just so perfect. It's so hilarious. And yeah, I highly recommend the abridged series. I recommend the anime. I even recommend the manga, despite its bad ending. You can read that pretty quickly. You can watch the entire anime in like 3 weeks. It's on Tubi. It's on Hulu. Highly recommend. Let me know what you all think. I hope to hear from you all soon. Happy reading. Happy watching. Bye.